The Chargers have never been known as a franchise that has a lot of good luck, but finally a break has gone their way that could change everything in the 2025 NFL season, and that's the suspension of Rashee Rice, the Kansas City star receiver who's expected to miss the first 6 games of the NFL season, including Week 1 in Brazil against the Bolts. What's up, everyone? I'm Sam Peña, a Bolt fan in the Berg for Chargers Digest, where we talk about all things Lightning. Today we're talking about the suspension of Rashee Rice and how that could impact the Bolts in 2025. We're also going to go over the recent waiver wire pickups and losses and what that could mean for the Chargers offense and defense. So, let's talk about it. So let's start off with the big news, Rashee Rice's suspension. This was something that a lot of people saw coming, but not at the beginning of the season. They thought it would be happening later on. How did this all come about? Well, let's start with Rashee's background. He was taken in the 2023 NFL Draft by the Chiefs and was seen as the future #1 target for Pat Mahomes. And boy, did he deliver in that first season. On 79 catches, he had 938 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns, and graded out according to Pro Football Focus at 85.4, which is the 5th highest grade for a rookie that season. But things quickly changed in March of 2024 when Rice was involved in a high-speed hit-and-run crash in Dallas, with this video from the scene showing him and several others leaving the scene without checking on the other people in the 4 cars that were involved in the crash. Classy move, I know, and one that's definitely garnered a lot of backlash for the Chiefs. Now, in fairness to Rice, he immediately turned himself into police, and he also pled guilty to 2 third-degree felonies. He was sentenced to 30 days of jail time and also had to settle an out-of-court lawsuit, and he also was told that he had to pay the medical fees for the people who were injured in the crash. Fortunately, no one was killed. But Rice was not suspended in 2024, even though that incident happened in March. In fact, he was expected to play the entire season, but it ultimately didn't end up mattering that he wasn't suspended because in Week 4 against the Chargers in LA, he suffered an LCL injury that required surgery and took him out for the entire season. But now fast forward to 2025, the Chiefs were expecting him to be their #1 receiving option. And it's something they've desperately needed since Travis Kelce has continued to steadily decline over the past few years. Mahomes hasn't had a true #1 receiver since they traded away Tyreek Hill back in 2022. So because of that, Rashee Rice was expected to be that guy. We saw flashes of it in 2023, and by all accounts, he was delivering on it in training camp practices. But we thought that a suspension was on the way, although earlier reports made it seem as if he was not going to miss the first few weeks of the season, that suspension would come down later in the year. Another decision that sparked quite a bit of backlash. Why is that the case? Well, let's talk about how this could be impacting the Chargers, because that's why this was such a controversial move. The first 6 weeks of the season are critical for the Chiefs because it's their toughest stretch of the schedule. Week 1, they're in Brazil against the Chargers, a playoff team. They then follow it up against the Eagles in Week 2, the team they just lost to in the Super Bowl. They have the Jags after that and the Giants, but they also have the Ravens and the Lions as well. So 4 of those first 6 teams are playoff teams, and 3 of them finished in the top 6 seeds of the NFL at season's end. These were going to be difficult games with Rashee on the board. Now that he's out of the picture, it seems as if Kansas City's offense might be a little bit shakier than we thought. Now, they are getting Marquise Brown to start this year, even though he missed the first part of last season. And Xavier Worthy is a young second-year player who they hope will be making the leap in 2025. But overall, there's still quite a few question marks for this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Travis Kelce is a year older. The left tackle they just drafted in the first round, he suffered a patellar tendon injury, which, as Charger fans well know, is pretty devastating. He is expected to be ready Week 1, but we don't know what type of shape he's going to be in. They also traded away Joe Thuney, one of their best linemen. So this Chiefs offense was going to be facing challenges going into the year. Now they might be facing even more challenges, losing their best receiver for the first 6 weeks of the season in the most important games of the year. Now listen, I would be lying if I told you I still would not be predicting the Chiefs to be the division winner. They're probably going to win this division still. I mean, for God's sake, they've made 3 Super Bowls in a row without having a number 1 receiver, a true X receiver. They're still a great team. They still have a good offense. Pat Mahomes is still the best quarterback in the league. But great teams don't last forever. At some point, challengers rise up to be able to take them down, and we've seen the AFC West just continue to get better and better and better. The Broncos look like they'll be a decent team this year. The Raiders are still struggling, but they made some improvements and, of course, hired Pete Carroll. And the Chargers definitely upgraded their offense as well, bringing back Keenan Allen and adding Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith. And Quentin Johnston, love him or hate him, he's gotten a lot better. And they added Omarion Hampton in the first round of the draft. So the Chargers offense should be more of a threat for Kansas City in 2025. So that's why all of this matters. Because if, and I know it's a big if, but if the Chargers can beat the Chiefs week 1, that division begins to look wide open. Because the Chiefs will have a very difficult schedule to start the year. If they falter in a few of those games, that could open the door for the Bolts or even the Broncos to be able to take the division lead, which could be massive in the 2025 season. We'll see what happens. Now, that's by far been the biggest news of the day, but let's not forget that waiver wire additions and losses are also happening today as well. The Chargers had a few players who were cut from the team yesterday that a lot of people were surprised to see let go. Starting off with Raheem "Rocket" Sanders. This was someone I really wanted to make the Bolts' 53-man roster, but there simply wasn't space for him. It was surprising, though, to see the Chargers only go with 3 running backs: Najee Harris, Omarion Hampton, and Hassan Haskins. A lot of people were upset that Haskins was kept over Sanders, but I understand why that decision was made because of special teams. But unfortunately, Raheem Sanders didn't make it to the Bolts' 53-man roster. He was picked up by the Cleveland Browns, a move that was expected since the Chargers were 22nd in the waiver order, and they actually weren't able to make any waiver wire additions because they still had to make room on the 53-man roster and didn't have that space after the decisions they made. Now, on the flip side, some good news that came out of the waiver wire situation. We did manage to bring back a few players who we thought were important to the team, including Kamani Vidal. He was the other running back who was in competition for that 4th roster spot. He cleared waivers. He's back on the practice squad, so the Chargers will hopefully be able to elevate him at some point this season if some sort of injury does happen, which is a possibility given how fragile the running back position is. By far the biggest news for the Chargers, though, when it comes to bringing someone back to the practice squad, is Tony Jefferson. Yesterday, I told Chargers fans that the dream was dead. Tony wasn't eligible for the waiver wire system. I thought teams would be chomping at the bit to be able to sign him. But either they weren't, or Tony simply wasn't interested in going with those other teams because he re-signed with the Chargers on their practice squad. That's huge for the Chargers because if something does happen in the safety room, Tony immediately will bring a veteran presence, a strong locker room presence, and strong play to the field, so the Chargers won't be experiencing much of a drop-off if they lose one of their top safeties. And I think that's the important thing for Bolts fans to take away from the waiver wire and also the roster cuts that have happened over the past 2 days. I've seen a lot of you on Twitter complaining about the moves that Hortiz made, saying, oh, I guess competitors aren't welcome on the Chargers because they didn't keep Raheem Sanders, because they didn't keep Tony Jefferson, and they played well. I'm going to be honest with you guys, though. At the end of the day, I think Hortiz made almost all of the right decisions. I know you don't want to keep Jasir Taylor. I get it. But remember, Taylor is one of the best gunners on the roster. Special teams matters. I know you didn't want to keep Hassan Haskins. Again, special teams matter. This is a 3-phase game. And simply put, the Chargers had depth at both running back and in the secondary, which meant that they didn't have to keep Tony and they didn't have to keep Sanders. On the flip side, though, they did manage to keep some players because they chose to cut Sanders and Jefferson that they wouldn't have been able to if they hadn't made those decisions. Marlowe Wax, one of the most impressive players in the preseason for the Chargers, is on the 53-man roster. His presence is even more important now because Junior Colson has been placed on injured reserve and will miss his entire second season in the NFL. That was a decision that was made with that in mind. Also, the Chargers were able to bring back Branson Taylor, Jaquezi Bridges, and Jefferson onto the team's practice squad. So in the end, everything worked out except for the loss of Raheem Sanders. Overall, though, this was a very, very strong offseason, I think, for Joe Hortiz. The biggest compliment I can give Joe Hortiz is he seems to be able to admit when he's made mistakes, such as the 6th and 7th round picks of Branson Taylor and Jaquezi Bridges. So he immediately corrected them, bringing in Nico Reed, keeping him on the roster. He had a 91.1 Pro Football Focus grade in preseason, one of the tops in the league, and then trading for Austin Deculus. He has continued to make the right choices. All I'm saying, Chargers fans, is I know it's only been a short amount of time with Joe Hortiz, but let Joe cook. If the team continues to struggle, then we'll make a decision on him. But for now, so far, I think he's making all the right choices. Thanks so much for watching again. I'm Sam Peña for Chargers Digest. Please like and subscribe. We're trying to build the channel from the ground up here, trying to get some improvements as well to our gear and our setup. It's a process, but we're working on it and hoping to give you more content just like this. Thank you all so much again, and remember, Bolt Nation, bolt up.